All right, today we're going to talk about is factoring polynomials. So let's go ahead and let's get started. This is a very important skill that you need to have. We're going to carry it through when we go to our next unit. And then also once you get into Math 2, we're going to be doing lots of factoring. So make sure you're really solid on this. First, what we're going to do is we're going to use it with a quadratic trinomial. So it's quadratic because it's the highest degree is to the second power, and then it's a trinomial because there's 3 terms. So we talked about difference of squares, which has 2 terms, and grouping, which has 4 terms. So this is where 3 terms. So we want to first make sure it's written in descending order from highest to lowest power. So your 2, 1, and then constant. And then also another thing to understand is your a value is whatever is attached to the x squared. So that's your a value. Your b value is whatever is attached to the first degree for x, which in this case it's 1. And then your c value is your constant. So that's whatever number is not attached to your variable. So once we know those, here's the steps. So first, we always see if there's a GCF. If there is, factor it out. So in this case, no GCF, so we don't have to do that step. Now we're going to multiply the first and last numbers together, and then we're going to list the factors of the product and determine which combination will add to the middle. So one way to kind of help keep you organized is we like to call it the X game, the X method, but what your X, draw your X, and the first part is going to be A times C. So when you're looking up here, we said A was 6 and C was -2. So we're going A times -2, which gives you -12. So we want to think of what multiplies for -12. And then it needs to multiply to give you -12, but it has to add to get your B term. Well, in this case, your B term is 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to list the factors of 12, and that would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 times 4. So we need to figure out what combination could we use to get 1. Well, I'm going to look here because these are only a difference of 1 anyways. But we need to have a -12, so it needs to multiply by negative, but you need to have a +1 at the end. So we can't do -4 and 3 because that's going to give you -12, which is good, but if you were to multiply them, but if you were to go -4 plus 3, that gives you -1. That's not what we want. So now let's try -3 and 4. So in this case, we'll make the 3 negative. We get -12. Okay, that works. And then this, before we made the 4 negative. So now let's try the -3 plus 4, and that's going to give us +1. That's what we want. So we want to make this -3. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put over here. So these are the numbers that we're going to use. Now that we have all of this information, we can rewrite the original problem, but this time we're going to make 4 terms by splitting the middle term into 2 numbers. So we're going to take our original equation, and we're going to write it here. We're going to take this middle term, and we're going to split it into -3, x, and +4x. So now that we've split this term into these 2 terms, now we can actually, and then make sure you bring the other parts down, now we can do grouping. So we're going to take this part right here and we're going to group. So we're going to, first off, there's no GCF, so we should have factored that out already. But now let's look here. They both have a 3x in common, so that's your GCF right here. And then if you divide this by 3x, you get 2x. If you divide this by 3x, you get -1. So that's the first section. The second section, we're going to group these. The GCF here is 2. So remember, you write that outside. And then 4x divided by 2 gives you 2x. Negative 2 divided by 2 gives you negative 1. Now remember, if we did this correctly, whatever is inside your parentheses should be exactly the same. So whatever is outside, make a group. Whatever is inside, make a group. There's no GCF, so we don't have to worry about bringing that down. And then that's your final answer. So it looks like a lot of steps at first, but once you get past this part and figuring out which factors to use, the rest is just following the steps from what we've done before. So let's go ahead, let's get started here. So what I did, I'll kind of erase that just to start, is we're going to look, and I'm going to make, I like to label it. Once we get the hang of it, you don't have to label it, but I always like to label, this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C, because A goes with the x squared, B goes with x to the first, and C is your constant. So A is 2, B is 3, and C is negative 9. Don't forget that negative. Now that you've labeled which one's what, let's go ahead, let's go ahead, make your x, and remember the top part is A times C. Well, A times C is negative 18. And then we want it to add to be plus 3. So when you're doing this, oops, I'm going to write that in blue to keep it coordinated. There we go. So now that we've done that, now we need to figure out what needs to happen to multiply to get negative 18, but to add to be 3. So we're going to look at our factors and figure out which one is a difference of 3. So that would be no, that would be no. This one looks good. Now we need to figure out, we need to have at least one negative. So would the negative be here or would the negative be here? So since this is a positive 3, you need more positives. So that means this is going to be negative 3. So we're going to go through, we're going to make this the negative 3, we're going to pick these, and we're going to put 1 here, 1 here. It doesn't matter the order. If you could put 6 here, negative 3 here, it doesn't matter. As long as they multiply to give you negative 18 and add to give you positive 3. So now we're going to take this, and we're breaking apart our middle term to be negative 3x. And then we're going to take this, and when we break apart our middle term, we get positive 6x. Don't forget to include those x's. And then we're going to bring the other parts down. So now you should have 4 terms. Now that we have 4 terms, now we can go on to group. So let's look at this section. And in this case, the GCF would be x. So if you divide this by x, you get 2x. So remember, GCF goes outside, leftovers go inside. And then now let's come over here. The GCF here is 3. So 3 goes outside, and you divide each term by 3. So this is going to give you 2x, and then this divided by 3 is negative 3. Again, what's inside the parentheses should be the same. So what's outside the parentheses, make a set there, or a factor there, and then what's inside the parentheses should go here. And then we don't have any GCFs, so that is the final part. All right, I want you to try this one. I already made the X for you, and make sure you tell me what your A, B, and C are. All right, let's practice some more. So let's go ahead. Now again, you can label your A, B, and C. So just know this is your A, this is your B, and this is your C. All right, so when you're doing your X, go A times C, and then needs to add to do B. So we're going to look at A times C, which is negative 21. So what I did here is I wrote factors of it, but it needs to combine to give you negative 4. Well, that's not 4 away. This one's 4 away, so we're going to look at this one. Now, since this is negative, the bigger number should have the negative with it. So we're going to make this -7, and we're going to use that. So what we did, and again, it doesn't matter what order you put it in. I could put 3 here and -7 here. But we picked -7, and we picked +3. They multiply to give you 21, and then they add to give you -4. So let's take our middle term and break that apart into -7x and +3x. Now we can group. So the greatest common factor in this one is x. So I'm dividing each term by x, and I'm going to get 3x minus 7. And then for this, we don't have anything, so there's no GCF, so you're going to divide each term by 1, because remember, there's no GCF, do +1, and then you're going to get 3x minus 7. So again, what's outside the parentheses is going to make one of the factors, and then what's inside the parentheses should be the same, so that's going to be your second factor. And that's your final. All right, go ahead, try that one. Again, I already set up the x for you. All right, so in this case, when you're doing this, it didn't have an a value here, so a is actually 1. B is 6, and then C is -16. So we want to figure out what multiplies, which would be a times -16. But it needs to add to be +6. So again, I wrote out, so we need something with the difference of 6. Nope, that doesn't work. That, okay, that works, and then that does not work. So we're going to look at 2 and 8. Now, since this is a positive, that means this is going to be positive and this should be negative. So that's how you can kind of think of that. So we're going to look at these and then put those into our x, and we're going to take our middle term, break it apart. So we said it's going to be 8a and -2a. Now start grouping. So they both have a in common, and then you're going to have a plus 8 left over, and then here they both have -2 in common. Now be careful when you're watching your sign. So if you divide this by -2, you're just left with a. If you divide this by -2, remember, that gives you a +8. So again, what's outside makes its own parentheses, and then your same set should make the other set of parentheses. There's no GCF, so you're good to go there. Okay, go ahead, try that one. And then here is one where there is a GCF. So in this case, the GCF is 2, so we're going to divide each term by 2, and you're left with x squared plus 4x minus 12. And remember, your GCF goes outside. Now we're just looking at this part when we do our x over here. So 1 times -12 gives you -12, but it needs to add to give you +4. So when you list the factors of 12, you're going to get 1 and 12. Well, there's not a difference of 4, so we can't use that. We got 2 and 6. Okay, we could use that one. And then we got 3 times 4. Well, we can't use that. It's not 4 apart. So let's look at 2 and 6. Now again, since b is +4, the bigger number has to be positive and the smaller number needs to be negative. So we're going to make this -2. And then we're going to take this, which is what we put here, and break our middle term apart. So that's going to make you -2x. That's going to make +6x. And then don't forget to bring those down. And then don't forget to bring your GCF down. All right, so we're ignoring our GCF right now, and we're just going to group. So in this case, it would be x, and when you divide each part by x, you're left with x minus 2. And then now we're going to group this, and the GCF would be 6. And then you divide that, you're going to have x minus 2. So again, what's outside makes one parenthesis, and then what's the same is going to be your second factor. And then again, don't forget to bring your GCF down, and this is your final thing. So don't forget to bring that down. All right, I want you to go ahead and try that one. There is a GCF. And then that is factoring polynomials.